welcome our moderator and speakers. Give a big applause to Mr. Gita Wirjawan, Mr. Toshio Taki, and also Mr. Anthony Kosasih. Mr. Gita Wirjawan, the stage is yours.
Very good afternoon to all of us. It's a pleasure for me to be up here. Mohon maaf dalam bahasa Inggris karena tamu kita dari Jepang. I'm up here with Toshio Taki, who's the co-founder of Money Forward, and Anthony Kosasih, who's the co-founder of Mekari. Let me start off with you.
Sure.
Toshio. Talk about how you think Japan has been and is likely to go through some of the challenges in terms of the adoption of digitization. And I would like for you to compare that with what you see in Indonesia, right? In terms of similarities and differences between what you're seeing in Japan and what you might be seeing in Indonesia. Please.
Hi. Hi everybody. I hope this is translated well from my broken English to good Indonesian. So I'm Toshio Taki, one of the co-founders of a company which is very much like Mekari. So we operate one of the largest accounting and payroll services in Japan. And we are one of the largest investors to Mekari. That's why I think I'm here maybe today. But yes, so speaking about similarities, like you might as well know that Japanese people are like highly crafted people. They are very well governed, actually. They come insanely on time. Every train in Japan comes insanely on time, and every employee actually comes insanely on time in Japan. But we have experienced 2 to 3 decades of very low growth. And some part of this low growth could be explained by like worsening demographics. So since Japanese people are making fewer children while living like forever, the population pyramid is now like reversed. But at the same time, so we are losing the labor population. So that's one of the reasons why we are facing this kind of low growth. But at the same time, we have been kind of very shy from adopting new technology. One reason may be that Japanese people work for the same company for a pretty long period. So if you have, multiple companies working like that, people will less adopt new ways of doing business. So that might be one reasoning. But maybe the other is people are now too much accustomed to low growth. That means we are more accustomed to like deflationary mind of business. So what I mean by that is you kind of keep the same revenue while cheapening the cost. So, I mean, that's pretty deflationary, while I think in many parts of the world, we have to be much more in the inflationary world where we constantly look for places where we can add to the value to the services. And we constantly look for the educational opportunities so that we can survive as the people who can receive higher wages. And that kind of loss of inflational mentality has been probably something that might become a similarity to Indonesian industry. And I'll stop for now, but I think those are the similarities and maybe the same differences that we might be able to change in this country.
I'm curious as to what you think are the opportunities that you're seeing in Indonesia, by way of what you're seeing the difference between Indonesia and Japan. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So I would like to frame that in the words of like societal mobility or upwards mobility. So if they are like, I used to work at a very Japanese traditional company before I went to Stanford to get an MBA. And a year after MBA, I was brainwashed in California. So I became entrepreneur. And it didn't take long for me. I was pretty conservative guy 15 years ago. But I don't think I appear like that right now. And I think it doesn't take a long time to actually for a person, even a very traditional person like me, to change. But I saw some very different species of Homo sapiens in California. And I also understood that you don't need to be in the top of the pyramid to be entrepreneurs. I mean, some people try to tell you that if you wish to be a good entrepreneur, you have to be at the top of the pyramid. That's bullshit. That's real bullshit. Any part of the pyramid is sufficient to become the entrepreneur. And any part of that pyramid, even in academia or business or anything else, if they can realize this upward possibility, then actually change can happen. So I think realizing the actual opportunities and realizing the educational opportunities to go up, I think that's the gap that we should focus on.
Thank you, Toshio. I want to pick up on this point and continue on with Anthony. Let me give you some background, right? If we take a look at the GDP per capita growth in Southeast Asia in the last 30 years, it's only gone up by about 2.7 times. If we were to compare that with the GDP per capita growth in China in the same 30-year period, it's gone up by 10 times. And we were talking earlier, in the other room about what are some of the factors that might have caused this or Southeast Asia to underperform. They're mainly attributable to underinvestment in education, underinvestment in infrastructure, governance, and competition. You are immersed in the activity of dealing with small, medium entrepreneurs across the nation. Are you feeling optimistic about the ability of Indonesia or Southeast Asia to grow much better than 2.7 times in the next 30 years?
2.7 times in the next 30 years. What annual growth rate does that translate to, Pak Gita?
Probably about 4 to 5%.
About 4 to 5%. Yeah. In a macro level, I'm not sure how this will translate, right? But optimistic, I think we have to be. We just have to be optimistic because I think there's a lot of untapped potential in Indonesia. Like just working with our business partners, there's lots of opportunities. So Mekari, I think, where we focus on our core market that we serve is in the small and medium segment. Some upper micro does get served too, but mostly in the small and medium. And even in this segment, we see a lot of potential for improvement. So I've been running Mekari for almost 10 years now. And since the start, we are a VC-funded company. So we took investments from venture capitals, and so it's like an external capital, right? While the vast majority of businesses in Indonesia is actually bootstrap, so they have to be profitable from day one. So when I was running Mekari, becoming profitable from day one is not in our mindset. It's not our mandate, right? The mandate is to grow and to deliver the most value that we can to the economy. So like growing a business from profits, I didn't realize that until a few years I go into like Mekari, or even after I started investing in some traditional businesses. So what I realized was, if you want to grow as a business, you'll need capital, right? And the majority of industries we have in Indonesia is like manufacturing, trading, retail, F&B, which needs capital. Like if you're an F&B, you want to grow revenue, then most likely the way to go is open another outlet. Like assuming that you're already up to a saturation point in one location, then you'll want to open another outlet. To open another outlet, you'll need more capital. And if you don't get capital externally, the only way to grow is to reinvest your profits. Now, a lot of businesses that are started in Indonesia, especially the newly started ones, they don't find optimal profitability from the get-go, right? And the statistics is 95% of small businesses fail in the first 5 years. So why does that happen? I think the productivity or the efficiency of how they run the business are not properly measured. So if it's properly measured, you know where to improve. And let's say you're building a business 1 to 3 years down the road, and you can find opportunities to, run your business sustainably. And it's at that point where you're ready to actually replicate it to another outlet. And at that point, of course, most likely you are profitable. At that point, you grow as a business, right? And I think that growth from bottom up will sort of contribute to the economy. Yeah.
Let me pick up on this and try to enrich the discussion a little bit. If we were to take a look at the last few years, there have been some disruptions in Indonesia where we've seen tangible evidence of increased productivity in sectors such as aviation, financial services,
Yes.
and marketplace, right? I would think that by way of the application of semi-high tech in each one of these three sectors, we've seen a rise or a dramatic rise in productivity. One would think within intuition that if you have a rise in productivity, you would have a rise in profitability. If you have a rise in profitability, you would have a rise in income per capita. And one would also think that the application of semi-high tech, if not high tech, would expand onto other sectors, right? I want to ask the both of you in terms of whether it is the right way of thinking, and if it's so, whether that serves as a basis for us to be optimistic about Indonesia in the next 10, 20, or 30 years.
So, as like Mekari and Money Forward provides, so we provide softwares to enhance the capabilities of back office operations, not the front office. So, and when you say back office, you sound like you're like a shadow part of the business, but that's totally wrong. I mean, if you don't have the right shadow, your front end will be like a misery. And I think a company who cannot manage itself, maybe it can last for like a year or two, but you need to build something sustainable to build a good company. And to do that, you do need to have a back office that is efficient and actually working and enabling the CEOs of the companies. So for the smaller companies, I think it's not the real high-end technology like ChatGPT, quantum computing, blockchain. I mean, not those kind of ultra high-tech stuff, but more normal cloud, digital, like Slack, synced thinking, easy decision making. I mean, those kind of technology stack is the important part to be installed for the small businesses. And we've seen that this can happen in Japan. So one of the hopes that I just mentioned as the low-growing country is like, now people are acknowledging that they do need a cloud-based back office because in Japan, the labor population is now decreasing. And even in a company that is producing profits, some companies are going out of business because they cannot hire younger talents. So, and that is actually a good thing. I mean, a company who cannot hire younger people on a long term might be okay to be extinct. And to hire young, good people, I mean, you have to pay higher salaries. And to pay higher salaries, you have to know the business better. And you have to guide the business better. So using the back office quality to enhance the level of pay, I think that's the real key that we should watch for.
I agree. Anthony,
yeah, I think
expand on this?
To answer that question, right, Pak Gita, The underlying question should that we should look at is how much unmet demand is there in Indonesia, right? I think the Indonesian people, if we compare to the quality of life of like the developed countries like America, Europe, or Australia, we are receiving much less, right? I mean, just even from basic nutrition in an average basis, there's still a lot of consumption opportunity to be made. But of course, on the other hand, is how do we increase income, right? I think Indonesia as a country, a lot of our income comes from the traditional industries. Like last year, I think we were lucky to have the mining boom, right? Where coal prices just shot up and all the mining coal companies like made so much profits. Maybe that's helping our economy without even realizing it. But I think if we just look at the unmet demand, there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic. Let's say if you want to measure how much chicken are we consuming on average per year, it's much lower to the US, right? Well, I think the US, where they're focusing more on like operations, right? Innovation, sorry. Indonesia, even just from operational efficiency and to increase those profits and enabling those companies who are well managed to reinvest a lot more and therefore to grow much faster, right? So imagine if if a company, like a large company, is making 10% profits a year. So that's all they can reinvest, and most likely how much they'll grow the next year is dependent on that 10% profits that's reinvested. But imagine if that company can lean up the operations through digitalization, digital transformation. There's lots of opportunities, right, in transport, logistics, in your manufacturing operations, and you can increase your profits to like 20%. 20% compound annual growth versus 10%, it's a whole lot if you think about like a 10-year horizon. So definitely optimistic, especially with the new technologies that's emerging and coming into Indonesia. So if we want to touch AI a little bit, right? AI, even for the past decade, it's been implemented a lot actually, but more towards the mathematical optimization kind of model. And it's been used a lot in supply chain optimization, manufacturing optimization, those that are numbers based. And just from last year, the hype trend is large language models like ChatGPT. Maybe that's why we can get these translations really well, right? And that opens up a whole new area for optimization, which is customer service, marketing, the growth side of things, right? You can generate content in a split second. And now you're kind of working with these AI copilots to generate whatever content you want, and something that previously took you 1 week to make will take you just a few hours to make, right? So all of the areas I think now have a lot of potential for optimization, for increased productivity, and a whole lot of reasons to be optimistic.
Can I add?
Yes, please.
So like, I think when it comes to the productivity issue, I think it's very important to condense the number of decisions. Like maybe you used to make 3 decisions per day, but if you could make 6 or 7 decisions in the same day, you're likely to be able to meet, maybe not the double the productivity, but at least like 150% of the productivity that you used to have. And I think during these COVID years, we have all understood what lockdown plus work looks like. So talking via like online Zoom or talking via chat, I mean, we have been able to actually create a situation where we can make decisions faster. I mean, before COVID, we always gathered in office. We maybe waited for Anthony to come back to the office to make, decisions. Or Swandi to come back to the office to make decisions. But nowadays, you just need to press the stamp. And that actually has created a situation where we can condense time. We can actually leave 3 days in 1 day. And that's, I think, the core, point of productivity gain, which is a pretty easy gain, actually. And we can all benefit from.
I want to pick up on this because to the extent that we're comfortable with some sectors that have enjoyed meaningful rise in productivity, i.e. financial services, aviation, and marketplace, but there's a whole slew of other sectors, right? Call it tourism, call it education, call it healthcare, call it energy, call it real estate, call it whatever, that hasn't been touched in a meaningful way by way of technology or technological innovations. I'm sitting here feeling very optimistic about the future of Indonesia, particularly in the context of the small, medium entrepreneurship, which has only been able to, as Suwandi has aptly pointed out, been able to enjoy only 15% of the productivity that's been enjoyed by the large guys, right? So imagine if we were to be able to move up that needle from 15% to, let's say, 50, much less 100%, all across the sectors, then within logic, Indonesia should be able to grow much faster than 5% per year, right? So let me pick up on the point of AI. If I was reading some of the publications on AIs, a lot of the pundits have been pontificating that the economic value creation coming from AI in the next 10 to 15 years would range between $50 to $100 trillion. $100 trillion is 100 times the GDP of Indonesia. So the baseline assumption for the economic growth rate trajectory for Indonesia is 5% without AI. Imagine if the SaaS that you're doing takes it from 5% to, let's say, 5+, and then you add on to that AI. Isn't it logical to think that Indonesia should be able to grow at 8 to 10% per year? Am I crazy?
Never crazy.
Okay.
Yeah. I think those 8 to 10% will be achieved by vaguely 2 points. One is there needs to be like a gradual change of industry composition. So there's definitely the sector of economy where digitalization may not necessarily the first, principle of the business. But, lessons from Japan easily is that in 1978, Japan reached its peak in its agricultural capacity. And since then, people in the agricultural area came to the city. The whole, growth of the Japanese economy since then has been more characterized by people coming from the rural areas to the cities. And when people come to the cities, they start creating very new industries, like service industry, manufacturing with a very high-tech context. So industrial composition is definitely one. But I think the second one is, even if you work at the same industry, you will be working very differently. So 30 years ago, I'm not sure how many people have been working 30 years ago. You might have been, but we used to stay in the office to take telephones. There were people who were attached to physical telephones just to take the telephone and, inform the senior members what people were calling for. And there used to be those kind of jobs.
Anthony was not born yet.
Yeah. But nowadays, we do multiple stuff. We do our own calendar, scheduling. And probably even in the tourism sector, I think people used to spend ages to just fix where to go, fix the clients, call the places to visit. But probably much of that has been automated or has become digital. So people are now capable of guiding more tourists. And I think those, even if you spend time in the same industry, much of your job will be multitasked. And I think that's the hope. That's the way you make more money. I want to show hands who wants to make more money. Be honest. I heard Indonesian people like Japanese are very shy, but I want to show hands who want to make more money. How many are your employees, by the way? Okay.
I think there's going to be
everybody.
inflation
I
soon.
think those are all Mekari employees.
Don't be shy. And if you do multitask, and if you are capable of doing more, you are evidently going to make more. I mean, that's a very important lesson to learn, I think.
But Taki-san, you mentioned about multitasking, right? I think multitasking never works for me, right? It's very difficult. But I think exactly towards that point, what the next kind of AI is expected to do is free up people's time, right? So even with the current wave of software, what we're trying to do is free up people's time. When people have more time, they have more opportunity to focus on growth, right? Through innovation, through whatever else initiatives that translates to growth. But in Indonesia, I think human capital is very scarce. So if the next kind of AI can 5x or 10x the workload capability of each individual, then that's got to translate to something, right? Yeah.
Fair enough, but here's a challenge, right? If we take a look at, you talked about human capital. Human capital is somewhat relevant to the quality of education, right? We talked about this before, right? If we were to look at the PISA score of the 15-year-olds in Indonesia, they're at about 382, which is more than 100 points below the global average of 488. We score 71 out of 78 countries, right? At some point, sooner rather than later, you're going to have a tough time finding the right recruit, finding the right good engineer, as Suwandi had aptly pointed out. I think you have to take this to the next level, where there is a broad base of production of talents that not only Mekari could be recruiting, but the Mekaris in every province of this country could have an easy time recruiting. How do you address that scarcity of talent?
Yeah, so that would require time, right, to build. But I'm talking about if we just even look at what we have today. So AI for pair programming. That, like Microsoft released a paper, but this is might be biased, right? And they are recording like 70% increase of productivity. That means with the same amount of people, you should be able to produce like almost double what you produce, right? And that actually already unleashed a whole lot of new possibilities, I guess, for you to tackle. But even at the like setting the right kind of work for the different people that you have in your company, that's very challenging, especially as the organizations grow larger. And I'm not talking about 10,000, 20,000 employee companies. I'm talking just about 200, 300, hundreds of employees, or even 50 to 100, right? Lots of companies are actually having trouble mapping what kind of work that like a laborer should do, and what kind of, how they should do it, and how to measure the productivity so that it's already optimal. Like, you know, just as simple as chili, petik cabe, you know, the optimal time to petik cabe rawit, maybe you should be able to get, I don't know, like 50 kilos an hour or however much. But the average might not be that much. And there's a whole lot of science to do that, right? There's task-based management practices. But in order to do that at scale, you'll need some kind of platform to support. Imagine doing that, like trying to manage every individual, you know, petik cabe, you know, every day with Excel or even with paper. imagine consolidating all of that data, right? So even, but imagine if you implement the right kind of platform and the right kind of method, you can increase one person's output from 10 kilos to 50 kilos. And you can do that sustainably, because a lot of the times what happens is once you're done with an improvement initiatives and you let go of it, it goes back down, right? What systems allows you to do is sustainability. Have that control continuously so that, okay, so once you're done with this problem, then you can move on to the next problem. So the growth is sustained.
I'm hearing from you that there is a suggestion that labor as a component of the production of a product, be it goods or services, will shrink over time. Whereas the role of capital will increase, the role of non-human, non-labor will increase over time. Does that mean that we do not need to invest in the future education of our kids and grandkids?
Definitely, right?
Definitely we need to.
You need to.
Okay.
You definitely need to invest, because if, let's take that petik cabe job.
Right.
If that petik cabe job doesn't need 5 people, then what's the other 4 gonna do? Right? That's not the best kind of job. So we better have a plan to find better jobs for them. And like just thinking on abundantly, right? There's lots of problems out there. So the question will be, how do we equip these people to solve other problems? Yeah.
Okay, you're talking about upward mobility or reskilling or repurposing, right? But I think there is a finite nature, right, with which you can allow for people to achieve or attain upward mobility, right? I want to pick up on this with you, Toshio. What do you think is the future of the world in the context of AI? Are you more dystopian or you're more utopian? Because I'm sort of like coming from the camp where we're not questioning enough. We're cultivating more than we're questioning about the prospect of AI.
There is a pretty famous study written by David Osborne and Dr. Frey back in 2013 about the jobs that will be lost and jobs that will remain in the era of computerization. So they wrote a thesis based on computerization, not on like actual AI, but it poses a very strong story that jobs that will be lost, the number one job that will be lost will be telemarketers, so people who do marketing on telephones. So bad luck with that. But telemarketing is said to be lost due to this paper. But the number of jobs that will always remain are, first, therapeutical physicians. So people who are in hospitals carrying the very heavily diseased people. This is the number one job that will remain even in the age of dystopia. The second one is people who work in the emergency areas, like people in earthquakes and tsunamis, and there will be people who need to take care about the chaos and also the damaged population, and people who take priorities and do the the prioritization of the actual people who need to be taken to hospitals. I mean, taking care about the heart and the chaos are the two jobs that will be strongly likely to remain even in the era of dystopias. And I think that's true. I mean, I come from the financial industry, but the very basic specialized financial infrastructure has been commoditized heavily during the last 20 years. Almost all of the equity traders at Goldman Sachs have been alternated to algorithms. And these things happen even in the very, top-end industries. But people who take care about people's hurts and people who take care about the very accidental or large chaotic circumstances, these people are much more higher in the economic value than they used to be. So, I mean, it doesn't really need to be an accident. I mean, I believe as a, executive, you should feel that everyday management of a company is like a chaos. I'm not very sure about that, but at least for money forward, managing a company is full of chaos. And I think those will still remain. And yeah.
What about podcasters? I want to know my future.
Is your podcast like chaotic? Or if it's boring, then...
It's the opposite of chaos.
Good luck with that.
Anthony, are you more dystopian or utopian about the future of AI? Because I see AI as a set of hallucinations. Yes. And the hallucinations are affected by the hypnosis. And the hypnosis is driven by the users and the technologists, right? It depends on whether or not the users and the technologists have good morality, good intentions, good wisdom, and all that. To the extent they don't, then the hallucination becomes malign. Yeah. And it could end up as a disease that's malignant. That's sort of like the risk that I'm trying to size up.
Yeah, so my perspective, at least for the, and this is not talking about AGI, right? When you're talking about dystopian kind of setting, you're talking about an AI that can be much more than a human, and then they'll take over the human species.
Terminate you.
Yeah, so Terminator kind of setting. So I haven't had that vision, maybe too far ahead. But if you understand the inner workings of AI, it's still an optimization mechanism with a feedback loop. So that's it, right? I don't think at the moment you can compare it to how human brains biologically work, even though it is sort of modeled like through it, to it, like the neural networks and deep learning, like it tries to model the brain, right? But it's, in simple terms, I think it's still a bunch of parameters that kind of computes a whole lot of inputs. So the special thing about the recent developments of AI is that it can do that with language, and it can do that it can solve problems generally. So previous AIs are like, you have an objective, right? You want to optimize for this, then like the humans assume or hypothesize the parameters that affects this objective most is these kinds of parameters, and then they start training these parameters based on a bunch of data, and until they find something that works 99.9% of the time or whatever threshold they need, then they use that model. And even a model that works 99.9% of the time after it's trained initially, it won't hold that kind of success factor. It will deplete. So you kind of need this continuous feedback loop also from the humans, right? So I think if we are talking dystopian, more like, how about if we create a deadly virus, right? It's not going to be AI that makes that. It's the humans using the AI that makes that. So, and if there is a human with that kind of intention, then with or without AI, there will be progress towards that. Just how fast will it be? Right? Maybe AI will accelerate it much faster, but it also accelerates a whole lot of other things much faster. We can, maybe previously we never imagined about going to the moon or going to build Mars bases in the next 20 years, but with AI, maybe yes. Why? Maybe the general AI can build a really good jet plane, right? that allows us to go there. So, and I think I'm more optimistic with the AI. Yeah.
So am I. I just want to caution the audience that we did not design cars to kill people, but cars can be deadly. So let's make sure that we stick to the plan. Yeah. We design AI not to kill people. But we've got to be sensitive. We've got to be cautious of the risk that AI could be deadly, the same way cars can be, right? Let's move gear, shift gear. I want to complete the circle since we only have a few minutes left. We started off by way of an observation that the GDP per capita in Southeast Asia in the last 30 years grew by only 2.7 times versus China's 10 times. There's been 4 reasons: underinvestment in education, underinvestment in infrastructure, governance, and competition. We're talking in front of a lot of people that are vested here in entrepreneurship, be it small, medium, or large, or even micro. I want to seek your wisdom on the last point of competition. What do you want to tell them in terms of how they could themselves be more competitive with respect to the peers in Indonesia, but also with respect to the peers in Southeast Asia, even more broadly with respect to the Chinese, the Japanese, the Koreans, the Indians, the Americans, the Europeans, the Australians? What could they learn from you so that they can be more competitive by way of applying digitization onto their day-to-day?
So, I mean, Japanese economy is kind of thought to be like a low, producing economy, but until the 1990s, Japan was like a rock star in means of international economy. And I think there was a huge motivation to go up the ladder. And actually Japan has the society where only within one generation you can go from the bottom quarter to the top quartile if you study hard towards the university. So studying hard and knowing that that can pay back to you is definitely one source of productivity. Of course, as like the country that is ranked 5th in PISA, but still enjoying a very low growth, there needs to be something more. And that something more is, of course, having this component of wish to make more money, but actually at the same time, making more money in this developed world means you can compensate that back to the society. And recently in Japan, many of the new grads from the university come to us to get recruited, not because we are the highest payers, but because we are the strongest influencers in the digitalized business. So I think having this, not just making money, I know everybody will raise your hand to make more money, but being able to give that back to something that you really care and making that as a visible opportunity. I think that's the point where I feel so much opportunity and opportunistic about the Japanese economy right now. So back to you.
Yeah, I think for me, regarding competition, the ultimate focus for a business is to produce value, right? So to produce value, you need to provide what the customer wants or what the customer appreciates. So I think our role in creating the tools to run a business is to enable them to be able to focus all their efforts towards delivering customer value. And I think in order to do that, you need to ensure that all the basic necessities, the basic operations of the business are run well. And to do that, I think you need structure. Yeah. So what do I mean by structure? Imagine if you want to create financial reports, or if you want to do your payroll, or you want to figure out the customer, who your customers are, and managing all of that on a spreadsheet. Doing it alone might be possible, but what if you have a team of 10 people, of 20 people, of 30 people? You'll need some sort of platform to ensure that the basics are right. You're delivering value to the customers consistently, and ultimately, after you've completed, you've achieved that, then what you can do is focus on more the innovative projects, on value, production, or whatever you do best, right? If you make pizzas, then make the best pizza. If you teach people, then teach it in the best way. And in that way, you'll have a much more productive, environment, and you'll be growing. Hopefully, it will translate to the 10x economic growth that we're all going for.
I'll pick up on pizza, and I've just been given another 2.5 minutes extra. I want to quiz the audience. Does anybody know how much it costs to make this beautiful product in China? Anybody want to take a guess? It's the iPhone 14, which cost about 18 to 20 million. Yeah. $100? Okay, I'll take one more guess. Anybody else want to guess? Okay, the lady?
Less than 100.
Less than 100, as in 99? Okay. I'll give you one more chance. How about sayap kiri? No. Anybody? Do I see hand up? Come on, guys. Okay, one guy here in the back. How much? 300. So I got a 99 guess, I got a 100 guess, I got a 300 guess. You ready for the answer? $10. I swear to God, I've sharing with these guys, they couldn't believe me. I've visited the factories 3 times. I've met up with the chairman of Foxconn who makes these things. They make the other products too. So start thinking, guys. Whatever you do, try to figure out a way so that what you do is a contribution to our ability to make this beautiful product for $10. Until then, shut up. I mean, let me pick up on this and ask for your wisdom. What is it that they can do to contribute? I mean, Mekari has been so value additive to the abilities of so many small, medium entrepreneurs to raise the productivity to a certain level, which is still about 15% of what the large guys can do. I believe we can move that needle up to a lot higher level. Money Forward is in a business of not only seeking higher productivity, but also seeking destinations of capital so that you can actually actualize some real tangible results. What sort of timeline can we achieve something like this for $10?
Wow.
Until we all lose our hair?
That's takes 2 years from you from now. Okay. Well, so even in very small businesses, I mean, we both work for the back office, but there's always a front office. And every business initially is built because you can sell something that for a price that is lower than what the customers are willing to pay for. And every small business initially have this one customer or maybe 100 customers that they have focused and make them happy. And I think maximizing that happiness is the only way to achieve the, let's say, 10x or 100x profitability that you are always looking for. And I mean, if it comes to like societal challenges, if it comes to your very one large stress that you really have, and if this service can solve that stress, you might be willing to pay 100x the cost of, the goods sold. So, I mean, focusing on the customers, not just asking the customers what they want, but imagining in 10 years' time how you can make this one guy happy in front of your shop. I mean, I think that's the route that you can reach before I lose my hair.
Yeah, but I think in order to make that kind of beautiful gadget for $10 in Indonesia, I think first you'll have to believe that it's possible to do the impossible, right? And you need to be able to be bold enough to go for it. Like, just go for it. Like, I have a friend. He runs a simple factory, right? And for many years, he was making losses. I helped him take a look at his financials. And from that financials, I figured out that his gross margins is too thin, right? It doesn't meet the industry benchmark. So I told him, hey, you should take a look at this because the industry benchmark is like, let's say 30%, while he was only making 10%, right? And he said, no, that's impossible. Everything that I use is already the same as my competitors, right? So then I told him, if you're doing the same thing as your competitors, soon enough, you'll close down because there's no reason for you to exist, right? So I told him, just look at it, look at all your cost components one by one and figure out which suppliers will give you the better pricing. After 6 months, he got that 30%, right? If I didn't tell him, just go for it. That's the industry benchmark. If you can't even achieve the industry benchmark, let alone achieving $10 iPhone, right? So when you see that something is possible, then you start to change your mind, right? If you see it's impossible to make that for $10, then you will never make it. But what's an iPhone? It's just pieces of grains, of sand, of glass, being somehow formed in a special way, right? Of course it costs $10. Where's the expensive part? You'll need Steve Jobs to make that for you, right? Yeah.
I think you guys hit the nail. It requires the ability to think of the impossible and making it possible. And I want to invite the audience, I think, to start thinking about the essence of having to socially re-engineer ourselves so that in every conversation at home, in every conversation at school, in every conversation at any social institution, in every conversation di kabupaten, kota, provinsi, dan segalanya, we need to start thinking about how do we become more productive? How do we become more competitive? How do we make sure that there's better governance? How do we make sure that our kids and grandkids are better educated? I wish I had another hour because we have a lot to talk about, but I've been warned by the screen that, we're out of time. I want to thank you, Toshio and Anthony, for being on stage, and please give a big hand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you so much, Mr. Gita Wirjawan, Mr. Toshio Taki, and also Mr. Anthony Kosasih. Please kindly stay on the stage. And now I would like to ask Mr. Anthony Kosasih to hand over the souvenirs to the speakers and our moderators, and then take a picture together. Yes, first to Mr. Gita Wirjawan as our moderator, and also to Mr. Toshio Taki. Okay, now please look at the camera and give a big smile in 3, 2, 1.